Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our masterclass on building a possibles pouch with John Barklow. My name's Jack Headland. I work for the onX side of things here, so we're just going to give it a minute or two to let everybody get settled in, get logged in. Couple of housekeeping items while we wait. Your audio and video are turned off, so we can't see or hear you. So no worries if you've got, kids in the background or dogs or anything like that. This class is being recorded, so if you do want to go back and rewatch a portion of it, or if you can't stay for the full length and you want to view the portion you've missed, we'll have it uploaded to the onX Hunt YouTube channel. We have a masterclass playlist there, is where you can find it. We'll also email everybody the link tomorrow evening. If you do have a question you would like us to answer, we have a Q&A box down below. If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen on most devices, that's where you can find it. So drop your questions in there. There's also a chat box. Chat is great if you just want to let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from. Chat is not a great place for questions, however, they just kind of tend to get lost in there and they're a little more difficult to keep track of. So please put them in the Q&A. And then finally, like most of our onX Hunt master classes, we do have a giveaway. We're going to be giving away some onX Hunt beanies at the end of the class, so I will post the giveaway link towards the end of the class there. So with that, looks like we've got quite a few folks logged in already. So I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to our expert. John, how's it going tonight?
Good, good, good. Thanks for inviting me. I get fired up to do these things, especially this time of year where depending on when and where you are in the West, we're like what, 90 days out from season, maybe even earlier if you're going to hunt sheep or goats in the North Country. So yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. Um, I'm John Barklow, as Jack said. Excited to talk about possibles pouches tonight. Um, just to let you know, I want to make this amount of time that we spend together tonight, I want to make it meaningful and beneficial to you. So I've got a presentation just to show some pictures so you don't have to look at my face the whole time. Definitely going to talk about survival and possibles pouches. If you guys have a question, um, please put it in the question box, like Jack said. You're not going to like throw me off. You don't need to hold them to the end. I'd rather make this, more of an interactive conversation. I want to make sure that, by the time we're done here, that you've gotten something out of it. You can certainly follow up afterwards. I'll, you know, give you some links at the end if you guys want to reach out after that. But I've been doing this a very long time, going over 20 years now. I started, I kind of quote got my formal education in survival and the outdoors and teaching in the military. And then I was able to bring that into hunting. I've been at Sitka Gear now for over 10 years, as amazing as that sounds. I work with Outdoor Class. I've got several courses online with Outdoor Class. I work with Montana Knife and onX and a bunch of different brands, Uncharted Supply Company. But really, my passion is to not just teach, but really teach people how to be better outdoors to achieve whatever their goals are. And it doesn't matter if it's, hunting, skiing, fishing, whatever. Um, but specifically when it comes to preparedness and survival, I think that it's something that maybe we don't talk about as much, or we talk about it in a vein that seems like it's something that hopefully never happens to us. And so we kind of put it out of our mind and just kind of dismiss it. Um, the way I look at it is it's not a question of if, but when something's going to happen when you go out into the mountains, into the wilderness, whatever word you want to use, and that could be on a trail run, it could be walking the dog on a long training hike, it could be scouting, it could be hunting. It doesn't really matter, but um, it's the odds are going to be more in your favor of some type of incident happening the more times you go out. And at that point when something happens, it's all the training you've done, it's all the preparedness and planning you've done that really could make the difference between having a great story to tell around the campfire and bragging rights to your buddies, right? Or having some kind of big epic where, you have to call people to come get you and you know maybe go to the hospital. So we'll go through that and kind of define survival. Survival to me is just enduring the elements. And so that could be enduring the elements on a hunt in really bad weather. It could be, on a hunt when, you're not seeing any animals and you got to ride out the heat of the day or the afternoon thunderstorm. It could be you sitting on a bull um, that you've quartered up and you just need to wait for daylight to pack it up because you need a little rest and to get it back to camp. It could be that broken leg where you're under a tree and you've in-reached your buddies to come get you, told them what basin you're in. And it's going to be, 1 or 2 days for them to come get you, and you have to survive what's on your back. But modern gear, modern survival, or modern gear and modern clothing has allowed us an enormous technical advantage that people in the past didn't have. So I'm gonna share my screen just to show some slides, and we'll kind of get into it. So Jack, help me out. You see the screen, right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Um, so these are a couple bubbas up in I think it's up in the NWT on a goat hunt. But in the past, so this is Fred Bear, right? Iconic guy. That when in the past, when we were wearing canvas and cotton and wool, and the tarp we carried was so big that it wasn't something you wanted to carry in your pack, that if you got wet or cold, it was a big deal. And you had to kind of figure out what to do immediately. So a lot of times that was, man, I'm wet, I'm cold. This clothing I have, it's not going to dry out. I need to build a fire. A fire is a luxury. We'll talk about that in a minute. A lot of times it's, what, I need to get on the horse or I need to start hiking back to the wall tent, back to my truck, whatever. And so your time, potentially was cut short. The margin of errors were a lot thinner when the gear wasn't as good. Now, it was as good as it could be at the time, but the gear comparatively from when Fred walked the field to modern day is totally different. Not only are things more performance oriented, so getting wet is not as big a deal. You often know that your clothing, your gear is going to dry out, that you can walk things dry, but that it's going to protect you from the elements that you can endure out there, those elements that, years ago may have pushed you back to camp or down below tree line. And maybe that was the one time that you were going to spot that caribou. So in this particular picture, this was in northern BC. We had just after this, we had spotted a herd of mountain caribou, went after it, and one of the guys killed a Boone and Crockett type caribou. But we were out in this kind of weather. The next day, it was bright and sunny and clear, but this was October, so the ability to endure the elements is better than ever. But I think we need to go back and just make sure that when you're building your kit, when you're packing, when you're planning, when you're training, I'm a huge proponent of training, that you make sure that you're looking at the right things. And one of those things is a possibles pouch. Now, before I talk about the possibles pouch, I think it's important to ground on the survival priorities. So your survival priorities, if you understand them, if you communicate those priorities to you and your partners, it's going to do a couple things. It's going to make sure that you all have the same, not the exact same knife or tourniquet or whatever it is, but you have the same gear and capabilities that you can manage situations, because you don't want the one weak link in the chain of, if you got two or three partners, to be the one that drives you out of the mountains. But also that if something happens, so let's say you're crossing the log and it's kind of icy and one person falls in and gets wet up to their waist, and it's a really cold day, that you don't panic, that you've discussed your survival priorities, and so that you know what to do, and you're not going to have this argument about building a fire or let's start hiking or no, we need to hit the SOS button. And so your survival priorities can be defined as the rule of threes. That's the easiest way to remember it. And so in order of priority, It's 3 hours without water, 3 days, or sorry, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. And this gives you a basic framework to kind of build your kit, but also your actions on if something were to happen. So shelter is going to be your number one priority, then followed by water, and then food. It says 3 weeks, right? Our bodies are capable of amazing things. And although you can go 3 weeks without food, I'm not saying that it's going to feel good. I'm not saying you're going to enjoy yourself. And oftentimes with modern technology, with sat phones and inReaches and more people out in the backcountry, there's a really good chance that you're not going to be out there that long anyways. But this helps inform and drive your priorities so that when something happens, that you're not going to sit there and argue or wonder if you're by yourself, man, what should I do? You've already thought through these things and you've planned and prepared. Um, so, what I wanted to talk about tonight specifically is what I call the possibles pouch. Now, the possibles pouch, I really like this term. This is a term that Aaron Snyder was throwing around, and I really liked it because the possibles pouch is a term that the mountain men used to describe, the pouch that they would carry that had all these things in there to manage all the possibilities that could occur when they're out in the mountains, right? Which back then they were tough dudes. Um, this is on the right. This is a picture of my possibles pouch, pretty much how it sits today. This possibles pouch, mine, has been an evolution over the years, and it kind of evolves, right? And so, if you're kind of just starting out, you may build a possibles pouch that's quite big with a lot of stuff because you have a little bit of experience and a lot of questions, and so you kind of over-index and bring a lot of stuff, and then you get to the point where you have some experience and you start to get a little bit, uh, you know, almost overconfident. And maybe you carry just the bare minimum, or maybe you don't carry a possibles pouch at all. And that's kind of the most dangerous part of the evolution of an outdoorsman. And then eventually you're going to land somewhere in the middle. So my possibles pouch here, that's I think it's a 2.5 liter. That's a Dyneema fanny pack. It's from Hyperlight Mountain Gear. But that whole thing, to include, there's a food bar. Maybe I'll throw in there something. I just weighed it. It's 2.1 pounds, and so it's very light. It's easy to carry. That's why I like it in the fanny pack. And then it's got everything in there. Now, a possibles pouch to me, when you build it, should have 7 key capabilities. And those capabilities, somewhat in order of priority, at least to start, are shelter. So we identified that shelters are number one priority. And then we're going to go into water and then food. So we need the ability to make some potable water so we're not drinking contaminated water, making ourselves sick. And then food, something to sustain us. And food, we'll talk about it, but it's as much for morale as it is for energy at some point. Fire, it's a primitive skill. We definitely need to have the ability or multiple ways to make fire. Some primitive signaling methods. We shouldn't always rely on our cell phones. And then some medical, right? Medical issues are things that could drive us out of the mountains. We'll talk about that. And then some basic repairs to our gear, maybe our clothing, and even our weapon system, right? And so we want to make sure that whatever it is, and this is going to be personalized to everybody in this constant evolution of which is kind of cool, right? It's kind of fun. But that's going to be what your possibles pouch is. Now, I prefer the term possibles pouch over calling this a survival kit for a couple reasons. One, not everything in there is necessarily needed for survival, right? However you define it. And by calling it a survival kit, it does a couple things. It puts it in our minds that, man, here's this survival kit, and I haven't used it in 2 or 3 years, and I'm carrying 2.1 pounds around in my pack, and I just don't have the need to carry it, or maybe my pack is full. And so it's going to be the first thing you leave behind if you look at it is this emergency kit that is kind of like break glass in case of war. It's the only time I touch it is if things are really dire. But if you consider it a possibles pouch and you start to look at it as these are things that I'm going to put in here that I personalize that are going to manage all what I call contingencies in the field. And so that contingency could be, again, um, I'm carrying a mule deer out on my back. I get cliffed out in the dark, or maybe it's foggy. And the best thing to do is just sit down and wait till daylight. And so that's where shelter comes in, because if I have that, I'm going to be more inclined to make the right decision to sit down, wait till daylight, and either climb back out or go down through the cliff so I don't hurt myself. Or if I am under that tree in reach of my buddies, it's going to be 24 hours. I need to get some water. Maybe I can crawl over to a muddy stream or an elk wallow. I don't want to ingest that water and give myself diarrhea and make my situation worse and dehydrate myself. Or food, again, is as much for morale. So, all these things all of a sudden, or like a blister, I pull out my medical kit, I work on my blister. All those things are going to make this a daily driver. So, if I'm taking this, and I always take it now, if I'm scouting, going out for a training hike, on a hunt, I'm using this thing constantly. I'm in and out of it, right? Maybe I'm up at a high lake and I take out my primitive fishing kit and I see what I can do by making just a simple rod and try to catch a trout, right? And then maybe if I catch the trout, I build a fire with my fire making kit and I cook the trout and I eat it, right? So that's a great training exercise, but I'm constantly using this. Or I'm going to, you know, practice building a fire, or I'm on the glassing knob in the spring and it's kind of snotty weather and we're waiting for, the right time of evening for the bears to come out. And so I'm going to practice my fire making skills in inclement weather. All these things are just constantly training and working out of this. And this just becomes part of your kit that you're never going to want to leave behind. And so if and when that situation happens, that you're prepared. So I'm going to just jump into and walk through all these in a little more detail. So again, we describe shelter as our number one for survival priority. 3 hours without shelter. Now, in a modern hunting scenario, our clothing is our primary form of shelter. Ever since cavemen put on a loincloth, they're trying to find some type of clothing to protect themselves from the elements, and that could be from sun, it could be from the cold, the wind, the rain. It doesn't matter. But when you find yourself out on that glassing knob, waiting for the elk or the mule deer to stand up, sitting in that cliff band waiting for daylight, you're going to want to put on clothing first, and that's going to trap your body heat to keep you warm. It's going to cut wind from stripping heat away from convective heat loss, and then it's going to potentially protect you from any exterior moisture, be it rain or snow, right? So clothing is your number one, your kind of your primary shelter, and then it's really going to depend on what you've got. Like, did I drop my pack to go stalk the mule deer that I only thought I would go 400 yards, but it ended up being 4,000 yards, or I thought I'd be gone 30 minutes and I was gone 3 hours. Um, And so maybe I didn't find my pack, but I've got my possibles pouch on me. And so I can carry a space blanket. I can carry maybe a little tarp. Like, you can carry tarps now that are 1 pound. If I've got my stocking pack with me and I've got a tarp, and I've got to ride the night out, right? Or I can't get back to base camp that night, whatever it is. But you can also have the ability, with that tarp, with that space blanket, if you need to then, with a little knowledge, be able to build natural shelters like this picture shows. And I can use the space blanket in the ceiling. I could use my little ground pad that I sit on the floor with some pine boughs, and I can create a natural shelter. And so I've got lots of different ways to do that. And so with a knife, some 550 cord, and some knowledge, I can create this shelter. With a space blanket, I can wrap it around me and my clothing for additional protection. At a minimum, I've got a puffy jacket and rain gear, which I consider part of my survival kit. Now, it's not something I'm going to carry necessarily in my possibles pouch because we don't want to make it too big, but I've always got a puffy jacket to trap my body heat and a rain jacket and pant to not only block wind but also rain and snow that I'll carry in my day pack. So all these things are possibilities for shelter. Now, you can, there's lots of things you can go one way or the other. Now, obviously, if you've got a tent, then you're pretty much set, right? You've got kind of the primary shelter. But remember this picture when I get to signaling. But shelter is important, and you want to understand that it's one, your number one priority, and two, you want to have multiple ways of creating a shelter and kind of thinking through where you are in the environment and what could happen. And if I get pushed out of the alpine, can I get down below the tree line and build a shelter like this, or can I just put on my rain gear and puffy and kind of ride out the storm under a low hanging spruce tree, whatever it is. You need to have those things figured out and worked out with your buddy, and then make sure that you carry a few small items in your possibles pouch to kind of manage that. Now, the second one is water, right? So 3 days without water. Oftentimes, when we're out moving around in the backcountry, especially hunting, I'm really bad at this. It's hard for me to keep up on my hydration. It's difficult as it is already because it's a very physical endeavor. It could be really hot out there. And so a lot of times it's hard to keep up on hydration, but you want to try to keep up on hydration, because if you do find yourself in that situation where you're under the tree waiting for your friends and maybe you only got like half a liter of water left, you're like, man, how am I going to get more water? I'm going to be cooked out here in the Arizona sun, and make my situation worse, maybe trending towards heat stress or even heat stroke if I don't get more water. You want to be able to procure potable drinking water. And so there's lots of different ways. There's purification and there's filtration. So purification, a SteriPen is a common thing that people carry. Filtration, you have different hand pumps, you have gravity fed pumps, but in a possibles pouch, you're not going to have room for that. And so I always carry some chlorine dioxide tablets. So Aquamira, Aquatabs, um, I like to carry 4 to 8 in my possibles pouch, or I'll carry 4 in my possibles pouch, and maybe 4 I'll carry in my optics harness. And then that gives me the ability to, if I'm separated from my pack, I don't have my SteriPen, I don't have my filter, I need some additional water, that I can dip in a stream of questionable origin, drop in, depending on how much water you're collecting, 1 tab per liter, and I can purify that water. Now, the water might not taste great, and it might still have some chewies in there, and it might still um, you know have some silt, but it's not going to give me diarrhea. So if I'm out on dog in a herd of elk, I'm away from camp, all I've got on me is my optics harness, my possibles pouch, and some maybe collapsible. Maybe I threw a collapsible water bottle in that possibles pouch, or maybe I've got it in my cargo pocket in my pant. I'm like, man, I really need some more water. You can dip in to the stream, drop a tab in, and you're good. That's not even a survival situation, but that's going to allow you to endure the elements, to spend more time in the field. I like to say I want to leave the field on my terms, not Mother Nature's. And so that's what this possibles pouch is really trying to set us up to do. So food. So food is what I like to call a target of opportunity. And what I mean by that is, again, you can go 3 weeks without food. Not that any of us want to do that, but we're not gonna die of starvation in just a few days, assuming we're out there that long. But if you've got a food bar in your possibles pouch, or I like to carry some electrolyte chews or some goo gels or something like that, you're going to have something to kind of satiate you. The thing, if you are in a survival situation and you're relying on other people to kind of come help you, and you're kind of down on your luck, and you've broke your ankle or whatever the case may be, um, food is a morale booster. It allows you to kind of take some semblance of control to your life, and like, oh, I have some food, like I'm okay. And that feeling of positivity and morale is really what you need, so that you don't start spiraling out of control and feeling sorry for yourself and getting this victim mentality. Now, you're certainly not going to pass up, say, an unaware grouse that's walking by. And if you're hunting, you have a weapon, so killing things is relatively easy. If you're up in Alaska, Canada, wherever, and you're in a blueberry patch, right, or a huckleberry patch, you're certainly going to be able to eat those berries, assuming they're safe. Um, but you want to make sure that if you do kill the rabbit, which is this is what this picture is, or even a fish, something like that, that you have the ability to cook that, so you're not going to try to eat it, right? I mean, you may think you're hungry enough to eat raw meat, and I'm not saying you wouldn't be, but is that going to make your situation worse? Are you going to get stomach cramps? Are you going to get diarrhea? Are you going to throw up not only the food you just ingested, but what little food maybe you had back in your stomach and any moisture that you had with it, and just compound your problem? So I think we should have the ability to make food. Like I said, I like to carry a little fishing kit. It's kind of fun to go out and see what you can do when you're at those high lakes and those streams, maybe in the middle of the day during a hunt when things are calm and the animals are laid down. Maybe you want to bring some 24 gauge brass wire to make snares, or buy some prefab snares, something like that. All those things are cool, but just understand that food is kind of third on the list, and that it's more of a target of opportunity. And so, if you know, get your shelter first. But if you've got water in your pack, or you're like, well, I can get water, but man, here comes the grouse. Like, you can certainly take advantage of those opportunities, but it shouldn't be number one on your list. Now, something that often does kind of default in our minds when we think of a quote survival situation, it's like, hey, what are you going to do if you don't make it back to camp? What are you going to do if you got to sit on that quartered up bowl with just making sure that the bears don't come in while you get a little rest? And you're like, oh, I'm just going to build a fire. I'm going to build a fire to warm up. I'm going to build a fire to scare the bears away. I'm going to build a fire to signal for help. And you can certainly do those things, and I'm not discounting them, but fire is a luxury in the backcountry. That's the way I like to look at it. And you realize that when you're out in environmental conditions where it is, if not impossible, damn near impossible to actually build a fire. And not only is it tough to build a fire, but it's almost tougher to build a fire that creates the life-giving warmth that we associate with that fire, right? We want to build this fire. We look at the fire, we see the fire in this picture, and we're like, yeah, that's the fire I want. That's the fire I can cook on. I can melt snow into water. I can signal with. I can warm myself up with. But that's not a guarantee. If you're in the alpine, there's often not a lot of wood. I've talked to a lot of people that have taken, the TP with the small collapsible stove on a caribou hunt, and they couldn't find any wood. I mean, there's just environments where there's no wood, or the wood is so saturated, like Kodiak, Alaska, where I lived, for over a decade. It's like, man, depending on the time of year, depending on where you were, good luck trying to start a fire that's going to provide any kind of life-giving warmth. But it's a primitive skill, and we absolutely should know how to build fire. It's something we absolutely should practice year round. I'm a huge proponent of practicing in inclement weather. So learn the skills, learn good practices, learn your trade craft when the weather's good. But that's a false sense of security if you don't go and train in the winter, in the spring, when it's wet, when the ground's so cold that it's going to suck what little heat you have in your fire out the bottom through conductive heat loss. That's where you really kind of begin to perfect your craft and build true capability. So some things I like to carry in my possibles pouches. We're almost always going to have a disposable lighter. So the disposable lighter, maybe I carry one in my optics kit, right? But I throw one in my possibles pouch. But those flints can get wet, and sometimes, depending on how cold your hands are, they're going to be tough to use, right? If we've ever tried to use those, and they got the little child safe thing on that should probably pull off. So I like to bring a refillable windproof lighter, so that allows me to direct flame right at, say, a piece of fire tinder. It's not going to blow out, and yes, there's a limited amount of fuel, but it's more than enough for while you're out in the field. And then when you come back, you just top it off. You can use waterproof matches. I'm not a huge proponent necessarily of waterproof matches, just because I tend to break them all the time, and they burn too fast. And so if I'm not quick, I'm not going to ignite the fire tinder that I want quick enough. And so, to each his own, but that's an option. And then something like either a magnesium block, and then some type of striker, ferro rod, something that's going to cast sparks. So those are all ignition methods. And then you need to figure out what that tinder is going to be. So the tinder is going to be the nucleus of the fire. That is going to be kind of what catches the spark, or you light with the match or the lighter, that's going to give you that little bit of flame, that little bit of hope that you can then begin to create the fire and build it. And so the tinder is going to be critical. There's all kinds of great prefab tinders out there. There's prefab tinders that, you can light and float on water, and they'll burn hot enough and long enough to give you an honest chance to get the kindling, which is the matchstick size wood, to actually start to ignite. But if you don't want to purchase some prefabricated tinder, you can take cotton balls and soak them in Vaseline, not just a little bit of Vaseline, but a lot of Vaseline. That petroleum will easily ignite. It will, again, burn for a long enough time to give you that chance to ignite the fire. If you've got duct tape that maybe you wrap around your trekking pole, you can take duct tape, you can tear it into strips, you can put it together, and you can light that duct tape. The glue on the duct tape will give you an opportunity to light a fire. You can take, if you've got like a multi-tool, you can take the bullet out of, say, a rifle cartridge, and you can pour the gunpowder down, and you can actually strike with the ferro rod the gunpowder, and it will ignite and burn. It won't blow up. It burns quick, but it burns hot, and so maybe that's enough to get the kindling going that you then can create the fire. But you also have a lot of natural tinders, and that's really going to depend on the environment you're in. So I always carry prefab tinder. I always carry some, again, in my optics harness, but there's always multiple in my possibles pouch, because again, it's not always for that survival situation. It's for riding out this snowstorm here. It's for sitting on the glassy knob. It's for a social circle around the camp at night when you're telling stories about how you almost got it done. Um, but you have natural tinders depending on your environment. And so that could be moss, it could be sap from a tree, it could be, tree bark, birch bark, it could be punk wood. All these different things are natural tinders. Now, they're not going to burn, my experience, as long or as hot as, say, a prefab. And so that's where having that modern technology allows us to guarantee we can ignite the tinder. If we can ignite the fire and build it up to some life-giving thing, is a different story. But fire is critical, and it's something that you should be practicing year round, assuming the regulations in your state allow it. And that's why I think spring and winter are the best times to do it, because oftentimes you don't have to worry about fire regulations. Now, the next one is signaling. We're going out in a very primitive environment, but we're carrying modern tools. We have cell phones, we have inReaches, sat phones, if anybody carries one, right? We have all these ways to communicate, and we get complacent because of that. And it doesn't take long to either be in your hunt area or even driving down the freeway to your hunt area to realize that cell service is not a guarantee anywhere, even on major freeways out west here. Certainly down in some hellhole that you killed a bull, you can't guarantee that you're going to get cell service. And depending on, you know, the look angle and where the satellites are, you're not just going to get instant messages back and forth on an inReach. Also, all these electronic devices, they run out of juice. They can get broken. You can drop them in a creek. All you can lose them. All these things, and so having a few forms of primitive signaling in your possibles pouch, I think is vitally important. So in this picture here, this is me on a hunt in the Davis Mountains of Texas, but this is a piece of a VF-17 signal panel that I just cut up from the military, and I carry it in my possibles pouch. And I carry this in my optics harness, but I also have a small, super light one that I carry in my possibles pouch. Now, in this case, I'm using it to signal my buddy who was on a glassy knob, and he was signaling back to me while I was on a stalk for an aoudad ram. So I was using that in a hunting scenario. Had nothing to do with survival. But I told you to remember that picture of the survival shelter, the lean-to I had built. If I build that shelter, if I'm injured, if I am waiting under that tree for my buddies to come get me, Trying to find a person in camo under a tree, even if I know the area well, is maybe not quite like finding a needle in a haystack, but damn near. And if I'm unfamiliar with the area or there's some SAR asset flying over, it's going to be really difficult to pick you out. And so I can take that signal panel out of my possibles pouch and I can tie it to the roof or the front of my survival shelter so that it's easier for them to see. Now, the one I carry, it's from a company called Team Easties. It's the ability to show up at night with light, like a headlamp or a light from a helicopter, but it also is blaze orange. If I'm laying under that tree, I could tie it to the tree. If I'm hurt so much, I don't know. I can't guarantee that I am going to be conscious when a rescue party walks by yelling my name or flying over. And so I could literally just lay that signal panel on top of me. Um, and then if I go to sleep or pass out or whatever the case may be, hopefully they can find me. Now, some other ways that you can signal are whistles. So whistles is a good one. You can't always think that you can yell. How loud is an elk bugle? And if the wind's blowing, you can't hear a bugle from a couple hundred yards away, which is frustrating. But a whistle's good. But maybe if you have broken ribs, you're not going to be able to yell. You're not going to be able to whistle. And so having a whistle is a good thing to bring, or maybe a little signal mirror. So being able to signal with the sun, of course, you got to have some type of sunlight. You can signal an aircraft or somebody coming by. You could also use the mylar from the space blanket to signal with, right? Something like that. Or if you bring a compass, a map, a compass, and a map, you can use, like I have a little mirror on my compass. All those things. You need to think through some primitive signaling devices for survival, but also it's going to help you on these stalks. So the next one is medical. Now, this is actually a frostbite uh, case from a student from years ago up in Alaska, but um, the medical kit, I think, is a critical component of a possibles pouch. I carry it all together, and the reason I do that is so I can just carry it at the top of my pack. I can grab that fanny pack. I can grab that possibles pouch, pull it out, strap it around my waist, and go. It's not going to interfere with my stalk. It's not going to interfere with my shooting. And I know everything's in there. I don't have to sit there and go, okay, I'm going to grab my possibles pouch. Where's my medical kit? Where's my food bar? Those kind of things. The thing with medical kits is you want to make sure that you're building a medical kit to manage common ailments and injuries and not start thinking about the one in a million one-offs, right? That really can't plan for. And often, not only can we not plan for it, but most of us don't have the medical skills or pedigree to, put in an airway or suture somebody up. Now, if you have those skills, or if you go acquire those skills from like a wilderness first responder course or wilderness first aid course, then you can build out that medical kit a little more robustly. But some common things you want to try to manage with medical kits are, blisters are very common, diarrhea, headaches from altitude, um, uh, uh, cuts and scrapes. We're working with knives all the time, broadheads, things like that when we're hunting. We want to make sure that we can clean wounds. If you're allergic to anything, bee stings, maybe you need an EpiPen, maybe you have asthma and you need your inhaler. Those kind of things are what should be in your medical kit. Now, um, I am a proponent of carrying a tourniquet. I carry one kind of lightweight tourniquet. It's not, what we carried in the military and multiple tourniquets, but I have something. And then I also have a pressure bandage. I carry quick clot gauze. I carry those things that I have slowly evolved and been trained in. And then with the experience I have to kind of make sure that I'm dialed in on the majority of the issues I've seen. And then also remember, you may have some things if you have your backpack that can supplement your medical kit. So if I have that foam ground pad that I like to carry and sit on and I've got to splint somebody's arm, I can use that foam to splint somebody's arm. I can take the tape off my trekking pole and tape that on there. I can do different things. I can take 550 cord that I have from my kill kit or my possibles pouch and make a splint. You can have other things that you can supplement the medical kit with. So I wouldn't blow it too far out of proportion. The one in that picture was one from Uncharted Supply Company. I think it's an excellent one for a lot of reasons. It's small, it's compact. Believe it or not, that little bag actually serves. If I pull the contents out, it serves as a bowl or a cup so I could collect water, drop tabs in there, and purify water. But you want to make sure that you're managing this. Um, Now, the common phrase that I like to apply with possibles pouches at large, and specifically when it comes to medical issues, is what if weighs a lot. And so we can start to what if this thing to death. We can start to think through every, god awful scenario. Well, what about a bear attack? What if a rock rolls down and pins my arm? Am I going to be able to cut my arm off so that I can, self rescue? You're not going to be able to plan for all those scenarios. You want things that provide a lot of versatility, and then with some knowledge and experience, you're able to craft some things that work for a lot of different things. So that what if weighs a lot is going to drive a lot of this, and specifically with medical kits, because again, if you make this so large and cumbersome, you're not going to bring it. It'll be the first thing that you leave behind. And the last thing I want to talk about in the spirit of possibles pouches and staying in the field and enduring those elements is being able to make some repairs. Repairs to a down jacket or a down sleeping bag. If you put a hole in it, you're going to lose all the down by the end of the trip if you don't have duct tape or tenacious tape or something patch kit to put over that hole. Putting a hole in a ground pad, they've gotten much better over the years, much more durable. This is a picture from a late season mule deer hunt where we were just literally living in the dirt for 7 days. Uh, just kind of that was our camp, and we were going up to the knob and glassing from sun up to sundown, and then coming back to camp. Um, but do you have maybe I like to carry some serving thread for my bow, but I also carry a sail needle. So if I need to stitch something on my pack, if I need to, I don't know, repair something on my clothes, maybe a strap comes off my gate or whatever the case may be. I carry zip ties. Um, all those things, again, being creative that are going to allow you to manage some common repairs to clothing and gear. And then I specifically bring some things. I'm an archery hunter, exclusively, so I bring some things exclusively to work on my bow. In case something were to happen in the field, I'd rather spend a day working on my bow in the field to get it up and running and operational again than having to leave. If I drove all the way from the East Coast to Colorado to go elk hunt and I blew up my bow, I'd rather be able to repair it one day in the field and give up that one day of hunting than the whole trip, or 3 days going back down to town. So, kind of to each his own. You kind of have to figure those things out. But that's kind of the way I'm looking at repairs in the field. And then finally, and I've touched on this a lot, and I really, in my opinion, can't kind of stress this enough, is that hunting seasons are super short, right? Like the average person is going to hunt 15 days a year. A fall season, and we have very liberal seasons here in Montana. Let's just call it 3 months. What are you doing the rest of the time? The rest of the year, you can be training, you can be building your skills, you can be going and doing, going on scouting trips and getting in shape and like practicing your survival skills and working with a buddy and testing out new gear, and all those things can be really fun things to do that are going to allow you to be more capable and lethal when you're in the field with that tag in your pocket and the time's ticking because the seasons are short. So I'm a huge proponent of going out there and training and making these things fun, right? They don't have to be, kicks in the pants. You can certainly do that, but they don't have to be that thing. So I'm a huge proponent of training, and that's where you really begin to dial in your systems and know what your clothing does and how much you need to carry and how warm you sleep at night and what type of ground pad you need. And tying it back to what we're doing tonight, what is in that possibles pouch? You may start in January building a possibles pouch, and by September that thing's gone through 6, 7 iterations, and by September, if you've trained the whole time, you are very confident in what you've got, understand your capabilities, and when something arises, you're like, oh, I can manage this. I've been here before. I know what I am capable of, and so at the end, that's really what it's all about. So um, I don't know how much I've been rambling on, probably too long, but Jack, uh, open for questions now. If anybody's got anything, more than willing to start answering questions.
Yeah, you covered a lot of the stuff that I had, prepared before, but you talked about, the what if ways a lot. I've heard of people talk about packing your fears. Are there any items that you commonly see people include in their possibles pouch that you think are maybe unnecessary or that they should leave it at truck or at base camp?
Well, I think the first thing is they carry too much of any one thing. So it's like, their medical kit will be too big, or they'll carry like a whole log or brick of fire tinder, right? Where maybe if you've practiced, all you really realize you need is, if I have, um, 3 or 4 that are the size of a Super Bowl or something like that, that's what I need. I think that people tend to carry knives that are way too big. So in my possibles pouch, I've tried a couple different ones. Huge proponent of Montana Knife, uh, their product. So I've run a Speed Goat, I've run a Blackfoot. I got a Whitetail now in there. I really like that one, but a fixed blade knife, 3 to 4 inches. Again, that's where training comes in. Like just capable of processing wood, right? I can cut with it. I can process an animal, but I can also baton wood to get to the core. Those types of things. I think that if you limit yourself to a small pouch and just say, okay, I'm going to build a kit that fits in this fanny pack and no more. But then also, like I said, think about what other things you're carrying. So I'm going to have a ground pad. I'm going to have a trekking pole. I'm going to have, duct tape on that trekking pole. And so just trying to think through, but it's what I tell people is give yourself the grace to like try some things. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And then you're going to personalize this. Everybody's possibles pouch is going to be personalized. But what I think is most important is like if you and I are going out hunting, that we understand our survival priorities and we carry one. The biggest mistake people make is they do not carry a possibles pouch. They do not carry a med kit. And so then when something happens, they are helpless. And that is completely preventable.
That's a good tip. We had a couple questions on do you customize your pouch kind of based on the environment, desert, mountains, warm weather, cold weather? Does it change much or does it stay pretty standard?
So the 7 capabilities stay the same, but I would say how I try to solve some of those are a little different. So as an example, if I'm in the desert, I'm not going to carry the fishing kit because there are no fish, right? There's no bodies of water. So maybe I'm going to carry, maybe that's when I'm going to carry the snare wire. If I know that I'm going to be out in the desert, there's a good chance I'm not going to be able to maybe fit that 1 pound tarp in there. But I was just talking to, I won't mention his name, but a very famous bow hunter. I was providing a seminar at Pope and Young, and he says, "Man, I carry a tarp, and this guy has killed giant mule deer." And he goes, "I carry a tarp with me sometimes." And he goes, "Because once I get in to 100 yards, 60 yards, depending," he goes, I don't want to get pushed out of there from the sun." And he goes, sometimes I wear sun hoodies. Sometimes I bring sunscreen. Sometimes I bring a tarp. And so, are you going to bring sunscreen when it's the middle of winter? Maybe, maybe not, but you're definitely going to bring it in the summer, right? Maybe you're going to bring more water tabs in the desert, but you don't necessarily need them as much in the alpine where maybe you trust the water source and you can just dip your bottle. So yeah, but I would say the 7 capabilities are the same, and then just modifying it. So as an example, I live in Montana, so you saw my kit. If somebody is living in Georgia or Nevada, theirs may be slightly different, but generally speaking, the capabilities are the same.
Excellent. We'll do a few more questions. I am going to post the giveaway link in the chat for everybody. So if you want to go ahead and click on that, that's live until midnight tonight. So if you're watching the class past June 18th, the giveaway is not open anymore, but for everybody here, go ahead and click on that. You mentioned your fishing kit. There was a question on what do you include in your fishing kit? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the fishing kit that I've got is actually it's a little survival fishing kit. I can I don't know what the best way to do it. Anyways, it's a little survival fishing kit, and so it's got some uh and you can build your own, right? And I when I was living in Alaska, I did because the fish were tended to be bigger in a lot of those lakes and streams. But some line, of course, a few different size hooks depending on what types of fish you're going to catch. Some bobbers, right? Some visual indicators on the surface. I've carried power bait before. I've carried a little rubber worm, a couple different flies. Again, that's where you start to personalize it to the environment that you're in. And you might not know if it's, if you live in Illinois and you're going on your first Alaska trip, you can certainly call people and find out, like, oh, what kind of fly should I bring? Something like that. But really, I want to just have enough. I want to have everything but the rod. And then the rod, I feel I can fashion from, a trekking pole, a tent pole, a long stick, something like that. Depending on where you are, if you're in a true survival situation, it's kind of like the law is going to allow you to survive and probably not penalize you. But some places you may be able to run a trout line, right? And so you may bring a longer piece of uh, of line with multiple hooks, right? So it's just really going to depend what you're trying to go after, and then kind of modify from there. And again, I just bought a prefab one anymore because I just find that those work really well for me, and then I just restock as I kind of go through it. Different kinds of lines, different weight tests, things like that.
We had a question come in. Corey asks, any suggestions to help with altitude sickness?
Awesome, awesome question. So altitude sickness, it can't be seen, it can't be smelled, it can't be tasted, but it absolutely can be felt. You can't fight it. It's gonna push back harder than you push against it. And so the best thing is, one, to be aware of it, which it sounds like Corey is. You have to be aware of it. Two, you have to understand that if you have no experience at altitude, that you absolutely need to um, factor in a lot of time to get what's called acclimated, right? And so basically, the higher you get, the less oxygen is in the air, and so you feel like things are harder. You're breathing harder. It's harder to hike. Things like that. Um, Take your time. So let's just say you're going from one of the coasts and you're flying into Denver at 5,000 feet and your trailhead's at 8,500 feet. I would fly into Denver and spend the night at 5,000 feet, chill out, don't go drinking and clubbing, drive to 8,500 feet the next day. That's more than enough. Chill out, hang there. The next morning, get up and maybe just hunt within 1,000 feet. So maybe go up no higher than 9,000 feet, but just hunt around camp. You can actually find some decent hunting around where you've camped. Then you can institute your route plan and go, okay, now I'm going to climb and on just an average acclimatization, and everybody's going to be different, is let's just say somewhere between 8 and 9,000 feet, somewhere in there. Don't go any higher and sleep any higher than 1,000 feet a day, right? So you can go up a couple thousand feet to hunt and look for mule deer, but if you spent one night at 8,500 feet, the next night sleep at 9,500 feet, the next night sleep at 10,500 feet. If you go from that trailhead at 8,500 right to say 12,500, because that's where the mule deer are in the high basin, you're probably going to get crushed. And that's where you start to get acute mountain sickness. And then you can get worse things like cerebral edema, pulmonary edema. You can take some preventative medications. You can go to a doctor and have some different medications prescribed as a preventative, but you still need to take your time. The mantra is climb high, sleep low. If you understand the signs and symptoms, which acute mountain sickness is kind of like a bad hangover, and if it doesn't go away within 24 hours, you can descend in elevation until you feel better. And if you start to get really bad headaches, loss of coordination, coughing up blood, like you need to get to a hospital immediately. And so, again, if you and your partners know that, then you know how to not overreact, but you also know what to do if that were to happen. So if you don't have enough days to acclimate, either find a lower area to hunt, or unfortunately, save up extra days to where you can spend, maybe the full 10 days acclimatizing, getting to 13,000 feet to go hunt, mountain goats or mule deer.
Excellent. Maybe a couple more here. Nick asked about medication for diarrhea. Says he carries over-the-counter medication. I don't know if that's Imodium or Pepto or something, but was curious if there's anything better out there or what you recommend.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly no medical professional. That's Nick. That's what I use is Imodium. I don't think I've used Pepto in a while, but I know Imodium works. I'm not super prone to getting diarrhea, but I can tell you that it can be a miserable, humiliating experience if you have it. Really, the problem with diarrhea is, aside from maybe shitting yourself, is it's you can get dehydrated, and so trying to stop that. Now, I've worked with a lot of medical professionals, corpsmen in the military, and they're like, try to let it run its course for 24 hours, and maybe you got something in you it's trying to get out, but then after that, if you want to stay in the field or you need to, get at least capable to get out of the field, that's where I like to start taking Imodium. I just took a wilderness first aid course, and that's what they recommended as well. So that's what I tend to carry.
I was just making notes as you were talking of things I need to buy for the fall, and that's one of them. Few things I'm missing from my kit. I'm going to post for the folks at home. I do want to mention our outdoor class elite discount. So you see John's hat there. He's got a couple different courses with outdoor class. I've been through both of them. If you enjoyed the class tonight, those are, even more expanding on, some of the topics we're talking about. So if you have an onX Hunt Elite membership, you get a 30% discount on that. Um, and there's all kinds of other courses, Corey Jacobson, Remy Warren, there's cooking stuff in there, you name it, from preparation for the hunt to preparing your kills. So I can't recommend that highly enough. So if you're enjoying this kind of content, this kind of educational material, take a look at that. I posted the link in the chat. We'll take you right to that discount. Let's see, maybe one more here, and then we'll sign off. Here's one. Miles asked, besides an emergency blanket, puffy jacket, and tools to make a fire, is there anything else you take for an extreme cold weather hunt besides those things?
um, the one thing I take for those cold weather hunts is not just a puffy jacket. I bring puffy pants. So puffy pants to me are, if I have a puffy jacket and puffy pants on, I essentially have a mobile sleeping bag. I can work, I can glass, I can do chores around camp wearing that. So that's something that's going to keep me warm and focused while I'm glassing. Uh, I've even used it, not actually moving in to hopefully take a shot, but actually on a stalk to like sit there and wait within 100 yards of a mule deer up in Alberta when it was really cold and just brutally windy. I was just laying there in my puffy jacket and pants, and then I stripped them off to move in to take the shot. The other thing is puffy socks. So not camp booties, not big camp booties, although you certainly can if you're working out of a fixed camp, but some kind of camp booties. And then the other thing for those extremely cold hunts is I like to carry, now maybe everybody doesn't carry these in the group, but like I always carry a pair of down mittens as well. And you can't do a lot with down mittens, can't shoot a weapon, can't work a phone necessarily. But if you do, either somebody loses their primary gloves or somebody starts to get some frostbite, like you saw that guy's feet, and you get swelling, you can put somebody in a pair of mittens and it's going to cut down on them, uh, you know, having any worse issues till you get them out of the field. So puffy pants, puffy socks, and a pair of down mittens absolutely is something that I also carry in those extreme hunts.
I love it. I have buddies that don't ever have puffy pants, and I carry them
Oh,
archery opener all the way through. Same with, I usually don't have the puffy mittens until a little bit later in the season, but
yeah, yeah.
man, they're nice and they weigh next to nothing.
The great thing about puffy pants is, there's zip off base layers now, but the puffy pants to me, it's like if I don't run anything but a pair of boxers or lightweight base layer, and often when I'm moving, I'm not cold, but where I'm going, like again, that glossy knob or in camp, I just pull those things on because they got side zippers and I pull them right off, and they're super convenient and they don't, weigh much of anything.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're about at time here, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. John, can't thank you enough. I'm probably going to go back and rewatch this one so that I can pay more attention and take notes. Um, but again, folks, if you're interested in this kind of information, check out Outdoor Class. I think it's a phenomenal resource that more people should be using. And you can learn from folks like John and others. And I'll plug ourselves. We're going to keep doing some master classes. The one thing we didn't talk about, I had a lot of questions about building a possibles kit for a bird dog, which
Mm.
I'm an upland hunter. So folks that ask questions on that, we are planning a class. We're going to get, we have a couple vets that we work with. So we're going to do something on building a med kit and things for dogs. So keep an eye out for that. Probably late August, early September, we're planning that one. So. And with that, John, thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you have a good weekend. It's summer. We got less than 3 months till opener. So let's get out there and do some camping and practicing so we're ready when the time comes. Have a
Can't
good one.
wait. Thanks, everyone.